welcome back to Ghouls Night In, the spooky chat show with your best ghoul friends. I'm Penny Snark.
And I'm Midge Munster. And now that things are really starting to pick up for Halloween season, I know you and I both went Halloween hunting this last week and found Halloween in the wild. So things are really starting to happen, and I'm getting jazzed. I'm getting
getting pumped up on that sweet pumpkin juice.
Yeah, my fall feelings are really coming in. So I wanted to lead into that a little bit today. Even though we're still in summertime, I thought I could take us into the fall feelings and talk about a story that always puts me in a spooky mood. That is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Ooh, I know this is a particular passion of yours.
It is. And actually, this is Penny already knows. This is actually funny. We recorded this episode the very first time we recorded together when I was up in Milwaukee, when we recorded our first 4 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the 4th episode we recorded. And it was evident that was the 4th episode we had recorded that day.
Yeah, we were pretty slap happy.
We were pretty loopy, and that was when we were like recording. We were filming it too for my YouTube channel to like just let our audience know it existed. So we had been doing costume changes and all kind. I mean, I had just drove. I went to Milwaukee.
You did, and a thunderstorm started.
And yeah, we're recording, and you can like hear the lightning in our mics. So anyway, we got to editing and we scrapped the episode. So I'm excited to finally be back talking about Sleepy Hollow, because I've wanted to do this episode for a while. But like Penny said, it is a real passion of mine, and I wanted to do it justice. So hopefully today is the day.
Yes, and I've probably forgotten everything that you told me, so
I know it's gonna be brand new.
It'll be fresh. It will be fresh again.
Well, that's been almost a year ago, which is freaking wild, but yeah. So I'm gonna kick us off talking about the history, and then we'll get into some adaptations and all that jazz. But The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, I think a lot of you probably know, is a short story that was written by Washington Irving in 1820. And it's often considered to be one of, if not the like first American ghost story, which is very cool. And even though it's not necessarily super original, there are quite a few stories that can be traced back as far as the Middle Ages, actually, that depict this kind of ghostly rider without a head. And there's lots of different lore from different backgrounds that have this kind of figure in them. I read in a history.com article that Elizabeth Bradley, who is a historian at the historic Hudson Valley, which is where Tarrytown / Sleepy Hollow is, that it's likely that the source of Irving's story was Sir Walter Scott's 1796 poem The Chase, which is a translation of a German poem, The Wild Huntsman, by Gottfried Bürger, with an umlaut, Bürger.
Oh, yes, you got to get that umlaut in there.
But likely based out of Norse mythology. So Scott's story, The Chase, is about this like kind of doomed hunter who is chased, surprise, aptly named, by the devil for like all of eternity, because he was kind of this wicked, not good guy. And so it is basically believed that Irving was inspired by that story, as well as the supposed, this has not really been what's the word I'm looking for, like qualified anywhere, that this was like a true story. But a supposed account of a Hessian soldier who had his head blown off by a cannon around Halloween 1776. So these things together bring us kind of our antagonist, the Headless Horseman. And then of course, another large part of his inspiration for the story came from his time spent in Tarrytown, New York, which is now known, part of Tarrytown now is known as Sleepy Hollow. They're neighboring towns / I'm not sure I really understand. I was reading this and it said that like Sleepy Hollow is technically northern Tarrytown, and that like they didn't actually identify as Sleepy Hollow until like 1996 or something crazy.
Oh,
That it was kind of like a, I don't know if it was like a nickname for that part of, I don't know.
yeah.
um, but Washington Irving, during a yellow fever outbreak in 1798, left New York to get out of the city and spend time with this family in Tarrytown and lived with them. And while he was there, obviously learned a lot about the culture of the neighboring towns and their local ghost stories. That area had a really rich Dutch history background, and so Irving also drew a lot of direct inspiration from the locations and things there. The Old Dutch Church is in
Yeah.
Tarrytown, which is featured prominently in Sleepy Hollow. And names like Van Tassel and Ichabod Crane are also pulled directly from Tarrytown, New York. The Van Tassels were a like real prominent family in that area, and I think a lot of folks know this, but there is a gravestone at the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery for Katrina Van Tassel. Um, Although not too long ago, a woman took it upon herself to try to take an impression of that tombstone with like plaster and did some pretty significant damage to it with like a chemical solvent. So don't do that.
Yeah, don't
Just
do that, y'all. Leave the gravestones alone.
in case you needed a public service announcement. Do not take impressions of historic grave sites that you are not qualified to do. But so that's kind of the base of where the story comes from. My first exposure to Sleepy Hollow was not actually the book itself. I didn't end up reading that until I was probably nine or 10, I would
Mhm.
say. But as long as I can remember, my family watched the Disney adaptation of Sleepy Hollow
Yes.
every single Halloween. Did you see this when you were younger as well?
I did. I wanna say we may have actually watched it in school at some
Oh,
point.
cool.
Like, I think they, like, showed it in school as, like, part of, like, a Halloween celebration thing. I definitely saw it growing up when I was a kid.
I also very distinctly remember, or at least the VHS copy we had like a like a short of Frog and Toad before it, and they were like I just remember they were stealing like a motor car. I remember
Yeah.
I very specifically remember his voice being like a motor car. Um, but anyway, I think that's definitely why that this story is so close to home for me, because it's like a
Mhm.
cozy comfort of being a kid and my family watching it every Halloween. I was actually shocked when I looked this up. That adaptation was released in 1949.
Oh, wow.
That seems wild to me. I don't know why. Like, I guess just because it was such a big part of my childhood in the 90s, I was like, surely it came out in like the 80s. I don't know.
No, it's
But I get,
true vintage.
yeah, true vintage, which I guess makes sense. If you have not seen this adaptation, first of all, I highly recommend it. It is on Disney Plus, and I buy Disney Plus like last Halloween just to watch this and The Haunted Mansion with Eddie Murphy in it.
There you
Yeah,
go.
I did. Um, but if you haven't seen it, it's really delightful, and the whole thing is narrated by Bing Crosby, who is one of my favorite voices of that
Mhm.
time, both singing and speaking. I just love listening to him talk. um, but it's really fun, and you've got this like delightful little musical jaunt in the middle, a little Headless Horseman song that Brahm sings, but it's still Bing Crosby. Um,
Yes.
Telling the ghost story of the Headless Horseman to Ichabod, and it's just really fun and campy. Um,
I mean, if you got Bing Crosby, you gotta put a little song in there.
you gotta put a little sauce on
Gotta
it,
put
yeah.
a little song in.
And this adaptation honestly is pretty good. Like, it actually, for Disney, it follows the original tale pretty well. And I can tell you, this scared the crap out of me as a kid.
Yeah.
Being, I mean, you and I both being like kids that just everything scared me.
Yes.
I very I have a very like distinct sound memory of the scene where he's like riding at night on the horse right before the horseman comes up, and the frogs are croaking and they're going like Ichabod,
Oh,
Ichabod.
yes. Yes, I remember that.
Like if I think about it too hard, I feel it in my spine. And I'm like 30 years old. My brain's like, ah.
Ugh.
But yeah, if you haven't seen it, I would check it out, especially if you've got little ones too. It's a great entry, like gateway drug to to Sleepy Hollow.
Yes.
And then, of course, what is probably my favorite adaptation, we get in 1999 Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow, starring Christina Ricci as Katrina and Johnny Depp as Ichabod Crane. And this takes us on a real left turn, though, from the
Oh, yes.
Disney adaptation, because okay, let's get into this, shall we? And feel free, Penny, just jump in at any time
All right.
you have comments. So Ichabod, first off, right out the gate, in the book, even, and the Disney adaptation, he is like a homely schoolmaster.
Yeah, gawky nerd.
Yeah, the book literally, in the original story, it says something about like he looked like, if you didn't know better, you would mistake him for a scarecrow that had escaped its field.
Oh, bud.
Yeah, gawky, great word. But of course, our Ichabod here is Johnny Depp, and he is wearing a flowy shirt, and it's very handsome. He's also like a constable in this adaptation, so he's like a cop, and he
he like invents forensic science.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right. He totally does. And yeah, he is going to Sleepy Hollow to investigate the string of murders that the locals believe are being committed by the Headless Horseman. And Ichabod is a skeptic, like somebody else that we know. You would get your shit pushed in by the Horseman, Penny. You'd be like, no, he doesn't exist.
No, I'm like, I don't think so.
See, I'm going to survive because of my healthy fear of ghosts.
You just have to put a spell under my bed to protect me.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll depend on you.
I got you. But yeah, he ends up obviously coming face to face with the Horseman, who is played in the film by the weirdest casting choice of all time. One Mr. Christopher Walken.
Christopher Walken with some real wild teeth prosthetics.
With the weirdest teeth you've ever seen.
Right? I'm like, isn't this guy supposed to be like a dude who got turned into a monster? I guess the monster part gave him weird teeth.
I guess I always assumed maybe he did that to himself because he was supposed to be this. So the thing that this does play into, this adaptation that the others don't, is that the Horseman is a Hessian soldier, and he's like this really violent, kind of bloodlusty soldier that gets killed and his head separated from his body. So it does play a bit into the history that the original story is based on, which of course Disney, because it's for kids, totally skips over that part.
Never mind.
There's actually a really interesting story I read that some people have accounts that this story was based on a Hessian who was actually like a good guy, basically, during the war, and that he was kind of wrongfully executed, and so then like this family that he had helped save buried him, but they couldn't find his head. There's so many. That's kind of the interesting thing about this, is like there's definitely a historical element to the story, but nobody really knows what. But anyway, yeah, Christopher Walken with his sharp teeth. In that vein, also, we have to take a moment and talk about Colleen Atwood's costume design for this movie.
Oh, stunning.
So good. She won an Academy Award for Best Costume Design for this film, and like reasonably so. It's absolutely beautiful. And if you're not familiar with Colleen Atwood, she is the costume designer behind like tons of incredible films. Like she did Edward Scissorhands. Recently she's done like the entire Fantastic Beasts franchise. She did like Memoirs of a Geisha, Chicago, Sweeney Todd, Silence of the Lambs. Like she's done so many things. And I actually just read she's doing the costumes for the new Wednesday Addams show that's coming to Netflix.
Ooh, well, that's
So
promising.
yeah, I'm really excited about that. She never misses, in my
No,
opinion.
yeah, her regard. I will say so, not. I don't love all of the films, but the clothes
Right.
are always on point.
Yeah.
She does incredible costuming work.
Yeah, she's smart with the types of fabric play, and that black and white dress is freaking iconic, and it's literally in the movie for 6 seconds.
Yes.
uh, and like I've watched a lot of stuff about that dress because of who I am as a person, and she went to the trouble of like painting thin green stripes outside the lines of like the black on that dress so that it would pop different on camera, and you can't see it at all on camera. And again, it's in the they literally film it for all of a minute. um just her attention to detail is incredible, and I really really appreciate what she brought to that movie. And then you and I both had the pleasure of buying a version of that dress.
Yes, we do. Oh my gosh, love it so much. Yeah, when the Sleepy Hollow collab with La Femme and Noir came out, I know that Midge and I both lost our minds.
Yeah, I spent a lot of money. It was not good. But it came out the week of my birthday, so I justified
So
it. It
you
was
have to.
And a lot of, I don't know how much crossover we have here with my channel, but a lot of y'all bought that the Horseman bag as of late because I showed it online and it was on that backlot clearance sale
Oh
from La
yeah.
Femme. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. So another kind of interesting aspect of which you actually brought this up a little bit, of the Tim Burton adaptation, is that Christina, my brain, that's her name, Katrina, is portrayed as a witch.
Yeah.
Which is a really cool. I like that they added that element in. I think it plays really fun into the fantasy of the world that they're building. But again, obviously not historical in any sense of the word. But what I do think is interesting is, again, playing into the history of kind of the time period that this was happening in, and that we would have been really kind of hot on the heels of the witch trials. And I mean, honestly, just like I said, the war plays such a huge part. And I read quite a bit. I feel like this is my like a hyperfixation that I had, and I went on like a deep dive of the history. But like a lot of historians will talk about how this story, to them, their perception is that the reason that the ghost exists, the reason that the headless horseman haunts, is as almost this kind of warning of our past, if that makes sense, like of the wars that were happening during that time, the cruelty that was shown to like brother against brother, and the witch trial, like all these things that happened leading up to this moment, that it's kind of a haunting of like humans' worst qualities, more or less. Which I think, in a sense is what ghost stories are, like our past coming back to get us.
Yeah, for sure.
But because I think that it's cool that not cool maybe, but like this is the first real, like truly American version of that story where it's based in like America's transgressions, like
our own special specific transgression,
our own special trauma.
How fortunate for us.
How fortunate for us. And then lastly, I know I've geeked out about this before, but I do also think that it's whether or not it was intentional, and I'm sure it was, the jack-o'-lantern aspect gets added into that is unique to Washington Irving's story. The other headless people throughout history are carrying some version of their own head,
Mm-hmm.
but the jack-o'-lantern is a spicy new take. And I really love this because he's a lost soul and he's carrying his
Mm-hmm.
little lantern
Yeah.
and trying to find his head and find his way out of the purgatory that he's stuck in. So I also just think that's a very cool call back to episode 1.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I love this story. I love the there is something really well, like, just haunting about it, even though it's also because the juxtaposition of Sleepy Hollow being this like cozy quiet town that, I mean, I think I would love to live in real Sleepy Hollow. Looks very nice. If y'all don't follow already, there is a couple on Instagram, and I believe they have a YouTube channel as well. They're called It's a Charming Life, and they're a married couple who both dress vintage, very, very cute. More like I would call them more 40s vintage. And they live in a cottage in the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery.
Yes,
And
I
they're
have watched some of their YouTube videos.
yeah.
It is in fact charming, as promised.
Yeah, and they call it the Cobweb Cottage, and they like it's my favorite thing. She'll post little videos in the morning, like if it's raining or snowing, she'll like post little scans out the window and saying like the neighbors are enjoying the rain or whatever. Like they call the tombstones the neighbors, and I think it's the cutest thing alive. Or dead, both. But yeah, so the Sleepy Hollow just seems so cozy and cute, and maybe that's my perception, but it looks beautiful. And so like butting that up against kind of this very haunting, and like Ichabod just goes missing and you never hear from him again, and like it's this lingering what happened, you know.
Yeah, I
I
mean
think
that's the classic of so many horror stories, and even kind of our modern real horror stories in true crime. You always say, "Oh, it
yeah,
was a quiet town. Nothing like this ever happened here."
right. And yeah, I feel like this really sets up a precedent for horror. It's just
Mhm.
it's so deliciously tasty. I love it.
Yes.
But if you for some reason have made it this far in your life being a Halloween lover and have not delved into all of these adaptations of Sleepy Hollow, I encourage you to do so. I also encourage you to listen to the audiobook of this story and freak yourself out. There's a lot of really great audiobook versions where they do like the sound, like the Foley
Oh yeah,
effects.
the soundscape, love it.
Uh-huh, and they'll like do the like galloping of the horsemen behind you and stuff. 10 of
Yeah.
10 would
It feels
recommend.
like such a good way, if you're finding Halloween in stores, or if you haven't found it yet and are still hoping, listening or watching to an adaptation of Sleepy Hollow seems like a great way to kind of give yourself a little chill,
A little boost.
a little boost, a little spooky boost.
I always watch the Tim Burton adaptation on rainy days. Like
Mhm.
I can't help it, and
It just
it's
has such a vibe. Like
it is it's a vibe master. It really is.
I didn't end up seeing it until I was like out of college. I it was
Yeah, I didn't see it for a long time as well.
Yeah, it like was never part of kind of like the canon of movies that I was familiar with. And I think it was just like other people online who were like, "Ooh, fall, time to watch Sleepy Hollow." And I was like, "What's up with this?" And it's always one of the movies that I like to put on when I'm like doing Halloween crafting and
Mm,
just kind of want to get the ambiance of something spooky.
yeah, and it's nice because like a lot of people are already familiar with the story, so you don't
Mhm.
have to like zone in. But 10 of 10. Well, that is what I have today for Sleepy Hollow. I'm glad that we finally got to talk about
Yeah.
it. This could have been a 2-hour episode, but I tried to keep it somewhat brief. If you are enjoying listening to Girls Night In, we would love to have you, if you don't mind, leave us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast, because that really does help us out, figure out what type of topics y'all like listening to, and it helps us reach new listeners as well. And we might just read it live right here on the air. And I think we have new review to, several new reviews, but one to read here today. Don't we, Penny?
We sure do. This review on iTunes is from Heather Pete 4, titled Spooky Topics. And she says, I love listening to Ghouls Night In. Midge and Penny talk about many topics that keep you interested, such as history, phobias, ghost stories, and so much more. It's so informative, too. That's what I love about this podcast. Top favorite episodes would be 27, 28, and anything about Wisconsin. Keep up the good work, ladies.
I love that people are living for Wisconsin
Hell
content.
yeah.
That's great.
You got to get that Wisconsin content in.
I have to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, if anyone is wondering which of those episodes they are, if you would like to take a look back and listen to some of Heather's favorite episodes, it is Dead Eyes and Deepfakes, the Uncanny Valley episode, and Victorian Coachella, the arsenic episode.
Victorian Coachella is one of my favorite episodes as well. Oh, I'm so glad you liked the Uncanny Valley. That's one of my favorites that I've gotten to research because it's a weird hyperphobia of mine. Yes. But I feel like it's a weird niche, so I'm so glad. That's awesome. Well, thank you for your review. We seriously appreciate that so much. And if you are looking for more content from the pod, you can check us out over on Instagram at Ghouls Night In Pod. Leave us comments over there. Let us know what other kind of topics you're interested in hearing about. We would love to hear your ideas. And if you're looking for me, you can find me across all platforms at Midge Munster.
And you can find me at Penny Snark.
And until next time, goodbye.